You've probably seen this thing pop up in the news, this, ominous looking clock, always seeming to suggest we're right on the edge of disaster. It's the Doomsday Clock, and it's become this really powerful symbol for our planet's biggest, most urgent threats. So, where are we today? Right now, the clock is set at 89 seconds to midnight. And yeah, the fact that we're talking about seconds now, not minutes, that's a totally deliberate choice by the scientists behind it. They're trying to scream that this is a moment of unprecedented urgency. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. In the clock's entire history, we're talking almost 80 years, this is the closest it has ever been to midnight. Closer than during the absolute height of the Cold War. Closer than the Cuban Missile Crisis. The most dangerous moment, at least according to this symbolic measure, is right now.
Which, of course, raises some pretty massive questions. How in the world did we get to this point? And what is this clock, really? Is it some kind of actual prediction? A scientific formula? Let's dive in and break it all down.
Okay, so to really understand why the clock is set where it is, we first have to get crystal clear on what it is, and maybe even more importantly, what it isn't. It's all about the symbolism, not about predicting the future. So the clock was first created way back in 1947 by the Bulletin of the atomic scientists. And listen, these weren't just any scientists. A lot of them had worked on the Manhattan Project. They were the very people who helped create the atomic bomb, and they were absolutely horrified by what they had unleashed on the world. They came up with the clock as a simple, stark, visual way to warn humanity about the danger of destroying ourselves with our own technology. And this right here is probably the most crucial point to get. The Doomsday Clock is a metaphor. It's a warning designed to spark a conversation and hopefully push leaders to act. It is not a crystal ball. There's no complex algorithm spitting out a date. A much better way to think about it is like a fever gauge for planet Earth, with a panel of very smart scientists and security experts deciding how high the temperature is. So if it's a barometer of danger, how has that reading changed over the years? Well, the clock's hands are anything but static. They've moved back and forth, and in doing so, they paint this fascinating and honestly, sometimes pretty terrifying picture of our recent history. This timeline really tells a story, doesn't it? It starts out at 7 minutes to midnight back in 47. Then it jumps to a terrifying 2 minutes in 1953, right when the US and the Soviets were testing hydrogen bombs. But then look at 1991, 17 minutes to midnight. That was the farthest it's ever been. That was a moment of incredible hope as the Cold War was ending. And then, then you see 2020, when we suddenly shifted into the realm of seconds, leading us to where we are today.
That timeline just raises a huge question, right? What changed? Why on earth are we considered closer to doomsday now than during the absolute peak of the Cold War? The answer, it turns out, is that the threats themselves have changed. They've evolved from a singular focus on bombs to a whole web of complex, interconnected crises.
You see, for decades, the clock was pretty much about one thing and one thing only: nuclear war. And let's be clear, that threat is still very, very real. But then, in 2007, the Bulletin officially added climate change to the list, recognizing it as a true civilization-level danger. And more recently, this third category has popped up: disruptive technologies. We're talking about things like weaponized AI, synthetic bioweapons, and the spread of mass disinformation, all things that can destabilize our world and make it harder to solve all the other problems. And all of that brings us right back to that 89-second setting. It's not just one thing. It's the combined, compounding effect of all these threats at once. The Bulletin points to the war in Ukraine and how casually people are talking about using nukes. They point to the world's continued failure to really tackle the climate crisis. And they point to the wild, unregulated race to use AI in warfare and to pump out disinformation. It's kind of a perfect storm of existential risks.
But here's the thing. Does this powerful symbol actually work? Not everyone is sold on the idea. There's a very real debate about whether the clock is a useful warning or if it's just, a fear-mongering stunt.
On one side, you have critics who argue the clock is totally unscientific and politically motivated. They call it statistical nonsense. Some even point out that its own founder once admitted the goal was to preserve civilization by scaring men into rationality. The fear is that keeping everyone on this permanent high alert doesn't inspire action, it just leads to paralysis. People just get overwhelmed and tune it all out. But the Bulletin fires right back at that, saying, hey, that's kind of the whole point. Their president, Rachel Bronson, says the clock is designed to be a simple, clear metaphor. The goal isn't to be some precise scientific instrument. The goal is to grab your attention, to force a public discussion about these massive issues, to make us all confront the dangers that we ourselves have created. So, here we are. We have this incredibly powerful, if controversial, warning. But what are we supposed to do with it? Is the situation just hopeless? This really leads us to the ultimate question. Can we actually turn back time?
I mean, let's just ask it directly. When you hear 89 seconds to midnight, it is so easy to feel completely hopeless. It sounds like a prophecy, right? Like the end is just around the corner and there's nothing we can do. But is that what the clock is really trying to say?
The answer from the clock's creators is a firm no. The clock is not a prophecy written in stone. The scientists at the Bulletin are absolutely clear that its hands can move backward. They already have, like they did back in 1991. The time on the clock is a direct result of human actions, or our inaction. And that means we, all of us, hold the power to change its course.
At the end of the day, the Doomsday Clock is just a symbol. It's a mirror held up to our world, reflecting the choices we're making as a species. It's asking us if this is really the path we want to stay on. The clock itself is just a warning. The real, final question isn't about what time it is. It's whether or not we're actually listening.